Good morning. What a beautiful day, naturally, outside. One of the 6 that we get per year in the Nashville area. Maybe 7 if we're lucky. What a beautiful day in the Spirit. Musicians, what a beautiful mix of music and ministry. Just taking in those words, letting the melodies penetrate my heart. And I could leave now and feel ministered to and fed and nourished. And these songs that we sang, such beautiful songs, I thought we were singing about something so profound and yet so simple. And that was the story of God's so loved the world that he gave. And then his son taking on his Father's Spirit, manifesting that in the flesh. And here he gave his own, he paid the ultimate price, really, didn't he? We were singing about the blood. And I think it's the 13th chapter of Zechariah that says, "In that day, there shall be a fountain opened for the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from their sins and their uncleanness." And there's a hymn that says, "There is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunge beneath that flood and lose all their guilty stains." Praise God. Aren't you thankful to be a recipient of that today? And if you have not been, you're in a place that believes that time and effort can be given. It's just a matter of looking back toward him, turning from your ways and turning towards him. And so as an elder in this church, I'm hesitant, or I have been hesitant, to speak publicly for some time. And I don't know why the Lord was dealing with me in such a manner, but it's become more clear. I have been listening to the message that Rob has been giving us. I feel like the Lord has been giving him something of a depth that we haven't maybe tapped into as of yet. We're an assembly that's 80-some years old, and we don't live in the past, but we look back to those things, and they tell a story. And while those things are telling a story, God's a progressive God. We're moving forward. And so we're seeing God begin to do different things. And some of these things that Rob has been bringing out, and I believe they've been directional. I don't know that he's felt that, hey, I'm going to get up and give direction, but they've been directional. They've been spiritually directional, and given us an understanding about the work of the Spirit, why the Spirit was given, how we're supposed to be operating and walking in that Spirit. And I was saying that I've felt to be quiet. And those of you that know me know that I do not run short of opinions. Just ask me. Like, I've always got something to say, an opinion about something that's going on. but I'm a very observant person by nature. But I've just been hesitant to speak publicly. And as Rob has been providing these things, and then I've been watching something in the Spirit trying to break forth, something trying to be birthed. And really, it's been through the next generation. It's been through younger people. And if you are aware of the optics around you on a Sunday afternoon, you can see up and down that there are younger people that are coming on. And I felt in the Spirit to be a little quieter and to make room and to watch the Spirit begin to work in these younger people. Because I think, as we know, if the church is going to move forward, then there has to be a vision, and there has to be the word take root, as Jesus says, in the hearts of another generation. And so it all made sense to me. I thought I was maybe having some kind of internal spiritual stroke or something. But I see that the Lord, He was working with me, like I said, as somebody has been active and somebody who has had a lot to say. And He has just put His finger on my lips for a moment. There's always a need for, now I speak to the elders and those that are more seasoned. There's always need for a word to be spoken in due season. And like it was said of the men of Issachar, how did it say that? Had an understanding of the times, and they had knowledge of what Israel was to do. And so there's a need for those that are elder and more seasoned to be offering that and to be bringing that support. So what I'm trying to say to you is everyone is needed. This is not just a church of the young or a church of the old. We've seen churches, I've been to churches, it's all blue hairs. And so we're not striving for that. But we've had such a wonderful history of people. I was thinking, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit to prayer. I think it was Shane a few weeks ago felt something on his mind to just present around prayer and the importance of prayer and the need for prayer. And then, Neil, wasn't it you Sunday that was speaking about how your life and your family's life was changed and metamorphosis took place in your family's life, transformation, because of a praying grandmother. And because of those who were living a life of holiness and dedication and devotion. And of course, when I think back, and this won't mean something to everyone because you don't have the history of this little group here, but there were people that as I was growing up and coming up, there were people who would take the time, and I would have confidence in their prayers because I knew they were living a dedicated life. I knew they had a devotion to God that was unmatched, specifically to mine. And so, Neil, you mentioned Sister Alzada here, and I thought of others. Again, pardon me if you've not been around long enough to hear these names, but I like to call them out once in a while because they were saviors to me. And Mark, I saw you, and I thought of your sweet mom. Neil brought that up last Sunday. Pardon me. What a dear soul. What a devoted Christian. But as April placed her need on Facebook this last week, of course, my heart broke. You'd have to be broken if your heart didn't break reading that, and the need that they have in their life. And I told my wife, I said, who is going to touch God for this situation? I can't. Sister Elvie's not here. The Spinxes aren't here. Vicki, I went to your mom many times. Your mom's not here. Sister Grace. Sister Alice, how many testimonies did we hear? And you guys pardon me that are newer. I don't live in the past. Trust me, if you know me, I don't. But there was impact made on my life by these simple acts of devotion and prayer and confidence that God could hear and could do. And we heard testimony by Alice many times of how, the Lord helped her in the simplest of life's menial tasks, just trying to survive as a single widowed woman. And I think often of the little women's prayer meeting that I took many of in my young married life. I had problems with work and problems trying to adjust to married life. And many times I took prayer to that little women's, need a Kleenex. That little ladies' prayer group that Sister Gladys and Elvie Mears, who was our pastor's mother, they had a little group of women that gathered there once a week. Many times I would confide in the Hollands and in Darlene and your parents and the Harrisons and the DeWitts. And again, I feel bad that you can't grasp the impact of some of these lives, but it just was a very special time and a blessed time to be a part. And I know that there are testimonies that ring out in all of your lives that may not have known that have been walking this Christian faith for some time. You have those types of people that was intercessing or intercessors for you and was touching God for you in a time when you did not have the strength. And so I was also touched by a memory. Many of you know my mom passed away. Gosh, I was 15 years old. I'm 60 right now. And so you can do the math of how long ago that was. But I had a couple of, thinking about prayer and who are going to fill these shoes. Can you sing that country song for me, Crystal? Crystal's our resident traditional country music fan here, so she probably knows that old country song, Who's Going to Fill Their Shoes? But I thought that as Neil was speaking, in his message, he was inviting and encouraging others to take up that mantle. And prayer being, Brother Steve used to talk to us about, and I don't know how he used to say this exactly, but he used to talk to us about having a tool belt or a tool bag, that there were certain tools in your tool bag that you could not be found without. And prayer is one of them. And so I was flashing back to a memory of the first one. I must have been probably just a tween, I would imagine. I probably wasn't even a teenager yet. But I remember, the house had gotten kind of quiet, and for whatever reason, it was midday, during a school day. For whatever reason, I wasn't there. I don't know if it was some kind of a holiday or why I wasn't at school. But I remember going down the hall, hearing a little like mumbling sound, go down the hall, and, the door was shut, but I opened up the door, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be this emotional. I know that can be. But there was my mom on her knees at the side of her bed, tears streaming down her face. And this wasn't some kind of, emotional outbreak or some kind of, she wasn't overly emotional. But there was something that I never knew what it was about. We didn't speak of it. I just saw it, turned around, shut the door, and walked back down the hall. But that image made an impact on a young life. And I remember that. I remember the fervency and the stress of whatever the need was, her calling out in the middle of the day. It could have been, knowing my mom, it could have been a phone call that she received, or she was very much in touch with all the elderly saints and, did a lot for them. And it could have been a phone call or something of that. But whatever it was, that image of her seeking God in such a fervent manner, it did something here for me that I carried and have still carried to this time. Again, not having her just for 15 years. Another moment is, I remember this wasn't too far from her death, so I was probably 15, right around there. And had already kind of made a mess of things, and, as teenagers can, they just get into things, and I'd already just made a big mess of things. And I remember she came into my room, and this was early in the morning, and she sat on the foot of my bed, and she just began to talk to me and pray for me. I should have been in trouble. She should have been coming in there to dole out whatever punishment or whatever grounding or whatever the case might have been at that moment. But she just began to talk to me about her expectation, and that she did not see this direction for my life, and what she saw for my life was a direction serving the Lord and being his servant. And begin to tell me, I felt that since you were a young child, and just begin to talk to me. And then that talk broke into a prayer. And then she just, I was still laying in bed, not unbroken, just, as teenagers are, emotionless, not, a storm, of course, going on in here, as a lot of teenagers are familiar with. But she just, at the foot of the bed, my feet were under the covers. She just grabbed my feet, began to pray, and just began to pray over me. And that's one of the last memories that I have of my mom, other than, what took place afterwards. But I mean, that's one of the impactful memories of having a conversation with my mom. So I think if you don't understand what I'm trying to say is, in summary, I feel like the Spirit of the Lord is working in our midst. I feel like He is trying to birth something in a new generation here that can break forth and will be something that we've not experienced and may be different than all of us older folks are used to seeing, or a manner of which it's unfolded could be different than anything we've ever seen. God doesn't always work in the same ways, and each generation has their own nuance and flavor and personality and those things. But I feel like that's we're on the cusp of that. And that's why I started to say that's why I feel like the Lord has put His finger on my lips a few times. How does Mark Twain say, like, can you quote that for me, one of you, about remaining a fool or that's it. Wait. That's right. It's better to remain silent and thought a fool than open one's mouth and remove all doubt. That's what. But you get my point, don't you? You get my point. And I feel like that Jesus gave us some, impactful things. Again, another memory that just keeps popping. I've just had a privilege. Everything hasn't been perfect. Our church has been a hot mess for a lot of years. Let's be transparent and honest with each other. We're people, we're messy. Relationships are messy. But I can remember times in my life when our elder pastor, we'd be somewhere in a room, and he would just quietly pray over me. Just pray over me for direction, for help, for strength. What a privilege that is, to have those kind of people in your life. Don't you want to be that type of person to somebody else, to your family? Brother Steve, many times, prayed over me in a room, not so quietly. Brother Steve knows how to pray and get in touch with God. Not as quiet as Brother Mears did. But it had impact. It touched my life. It's still carrying me. Those prayers have carried me and are carrying me, and I trust will carry me through to the end. Amen. I believe that. I have that confidence. And so, what parent hasn't prayed over a fevered child? You know that feeling. And his disciples noticed that there was something about the Christ on this earth. The Lord, teach us to pray. The first thing he says, well, when you go into your closet, in other words, it's not all about, we saw what the Lord thought about loud, repetitive prayers. We saw what, we understood what he made it clear what he thought about that. But it's getting in that private place. That's why he used the term closet. Get in private. And I have to get away from the house. There's a lot going on at my house these days. And I have to get away. And there's a little Pentecostal church. Don't know them, never talked to them. And it wouldn't even matter if it was Pentecostal. It's just the closest church to my house. I can walk there. It's a little Church of God of Prophecy in Portland. But I'll take my car up there and pull in their driveway in times of need, and I will cry out to God. And I am a little bit comforted that it is Pentecostal, because if somebody was out making a scene in the car praying, you might want to call an ambulance or maybe the mental health co-op or something. But thanks, Justin. But that's why another reason I feel comfortable there, because I know if somebody would walk out and see me, they'd just be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, bless him, Lord," But that's what I do. I get away from there and I go in times of great need, and I can tell you how the Lord has answered prayers in those situations. And then another place he says, when you stand praying, forgive. Well, there's a concept. To have forgiveness in your heart before you begin to inquire of the Lord. And standing, sometimes we're kneeling, sometimes we're on our face. We read that through the scriptures. So honestly, it doesn't really, what the message is it's not the posture of the physical body or the physical man. It's the posture of the heart. And what the heart is, the humbleness and the mercy that you're receiving, but also giving out to others. Forgive. And then enter with thanksgiving. Colossians 4:2 talks about devoting to prayer, to prayer with thanksgiving. And then Paul talks about rejoice always and pray continually. And then, Rob, do you have that? Can you just read out James 5? It talks about, is any suffering? He says, let him pray. Just read down through there, and then I'll finish with that. Somewhere around the 13th chapter, maybe, or verse.
Yeah. Is any among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing psalms. Is anyone sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith will save the sick, and the Lord will raise him up. And if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven.
Yeah, beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? So we have this hope. Come boldly, he says, to the throne of grace to make your petition before the Lord. He talks about asking and knocking and seeking in prayer. And he says, call on me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. And he said, that honors me, or you will glorify me. In other words, petitioning the Lord, that honors him. It shows that you're bringing, you're recognizing his ability to save, to have a saving hand and a saving arm. Praise God. I'm just so grateful how the Lord has carried me all these years. Do you remember this old chorus? He says, reach out, and touch the Lord as he goes by. You'll find he's not too busy to hear your heart's cry. He's passing by this moment, your needs to supply. Reach out and touch the Lord as he goes by. Do you feel like praying? I'm thinking about my friend Lester and what he's going through. My friend Jerry, physical needs. My dear friend Scarlett. My dear friend Wade, who posted a need this week on Facebook. My friends, their sweet son Justin. We've got Morse Fest coming up, that the Lord would do what he promised he would do, and that's make a change in lives and transform. And then Vicki, someone unspoken request. Yeah. Let's remember Kit. My God. Serious need. Thank you, Wade, for reminding us of that. All right. How many just have an unspoken request? They can just signify by the upraised hand. Let's just take a few minutes, pray, and ask God. We know that he is able.
As Chris sang that song, it confirmed a thought that I had been feeling while he was speaking, when he said, reach out and touch the Lord as he walks by, as he passes by. You'll find he's not too busy. Yeah, he's not too busy. And I'm afraid that me, you probably too, but certainly me, have gotten to a place in our culture that we're just too busy. And this word that was brought by Neil last week about the mantle, which is the spiritual clothing that was being worn by a previous generation, who has picked that clothing up? That was the question he was asking, who has picked that clothing up? And it's going to wear differently on you and me than it did with them. It just will. But there's a clothing, and we find in the New Testament that clothing is Christ. That we put that on, he says, be clothed, put off the old man and put on the new man that is being renewed every day. And there's an ever-fresh renewal of God's Spirit that clothes us and calls us into actions for others that isn't always easy. It requires sacrifice. It requires proximity. It requires proximity. Reach out and touch the Lord as he passes by. It requires proximity and a reduction in the busyness that life. How many new inventions do we have to make our lives less busy?
How's that going for you, right? How's that working out? But when we found ourselves in trouble as humanity, when we found ourselves in trouble, what is our natural tendency is to hide or to separate. But it's the tendency or the inclination or the character of God to be present. As soon as there's somebody in need, his inclination was to be present. It says that God walked with them in the cool of the day. They had fallen. They had already listened to the voice of the serpent, yet the God that we serve wanted to be present with them. Yet they found themselves separated. And it is, but we can think that God's call on our life is to be separate, but God's calling us to full-on engagement with those that are most in need. I love what Paul says over there in 2 Corinthians 5 when he says, if anyone is risen with Christ, they are a new creation. Old things are passed away. All things are becoming new. Then he says, we have been given this ministry of reconciliation. God through Christ crying out within us saying, be reconciled to God. See, there's this ministry that we've been given, and that ministry requires proximity. The reason when Sister Mears would put her head down and start working her way back there is she knew that it wasn't going to happen. She needed to get back there to where you were, to say a word in your ear, to call on you to make some commitment, B. And when they saw that you were in need, it's like that post that Wade gave. We were singing about the blood earlier today, right? We were singing about the blood, but Wade posted something last week on Facebook or somewhere. And it was when the cells of the body are, when you're feeling joy, when you're bringing their joy to the actual agents within the blood begin to go on the attack to disease and things that are hurting the body. And Paul uses, and I don't think just loosely, the metaphor of the body in 1 Corinthians 12 when he says, you're all members of the body, you're all members in particular. The body has different functions. But man, when the body has need, when one member suffers, he says, they all suffer. Going to that need, going to that point of help, it requires proximity. Paul, he goes on after there in 2 Corinthians 5, he goes on. I've never made a connection here. As a matter of fact, I've always thought, well, this is kind of weird. Why does Paul say that we are ambassadors for Christ in the 5th chapter, saying to all the rest of the world, be reconciled to God? But in the 6th chapter, he says, come out from among them and be separate and do not partake of her sins. How are we close yet, how does all that work? How do we come out of her yet be in her and be the agency that God has called us to be? But there's this little thing at the beginning of that verse. One of it was probably like verse 10, 11, something in there, in the 6th chapter. And Paul says, I have opened up my heart to you. Now, at first, when I read verses like that, I'm like, well, what did that have to do with all of this stuff that was going on before? I've been in shipwrecked, I've been beaten, all of this stuff at the beginning of the 6th chapter of 2 Corinthians, all of this trouble that he's gone through, Paul is basically saying, look what I've gone, look, I wanted to be close to you so much, so badly, that I've endured incredible hardship just to be close to you. I've opened your heart to me. Open your heart. I've opened my heart to you. Open your heart to me. Somehow they were rejecting him about something. But man, I want to do a better job. I want to do a better job of opening my heart to others, of being proximate to you and to people in need, to be so sensitive to the needs of others that I'm close by. And it comes with hardship. It comes with challenges. Sometimes it's shipwreck. Sometimes, there's things that we have to go through. We give up certain rights to be close to people. And what was it that Chris said? Sometimes doing life together gets a little messy. Doing life together gets messy. But that's what God has called us to. He's called us to get into the mess with one another. When one member suffers, we all suffer. To break open our hearts, to take our time, to be close. Because as I would say that the Lord was here present with us today, but he was here present with us today through the words and through the touch of the many-membered body that gathered here today, through the songs of our singers, through the words of our speakers, through the prayers of those of you that prayed and laid hands on people. That's how the Lord was close. He says, because I go to the Father, I will send you another comforter. Christ is not here, but he says, because I go to the Father, greater works than these shall you do. There are things that he did when he was here that now is incumbent on us. That we are the ones that would touch, that we would connect, that we would be proximate to others in needs.
And just to briefly say, one of those greater works, James 5:19 says, if any one of you strays from the truth and one turns him back. Right. Just that phrase. Right. And so to turn someone back takes great prayer because of the hard heart and the evil spirits. It's a lot against someone who's going on the wrong path, a lot working against them to get them on the wrong path. But to turn them back can happen, but it happens through great prayer, as we've heard today.
Yeah, that's actually what Paul goes on to say there in that sixth chapter, when he begins to say, he goes, what alliance? Don't be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. What alliance does light have with darkness? Or does the temple with idols, or with Christ with Beliar? What is that alignment there? If we are not joined with Christ, if we are not part of the other, we cannot call people in. Our prayers are ineffective. Paul then says, you are the temple. How important that is. Where is the place of prayer? Jesus says there on his triumphal entry, you have turned my Father's house from a house of prayer to a den of brigands, of thieves, of abusers. Now, what was he calling for? He was calling for separation so that there was something for the suffering people of this world to be drawn to. So God has called us to something very important. There's a holiness, there is a separation. but it's a separation of that is for a purpose. How, like right now, what if our ambassador to China, he says, you are ambassadors of Christ in the 5th chapter. What if our ambassador of Christ, to China was behind the scenes working out private deals with the Chinese so that they could get profit, right? That's what he's saying over there. He's saying, what allegiance do you have? Don't have any other loyalties. That's what it means not to have fellowship, not to have any other loyalties, no other allegiances. Our separation isn't distance. Our separation is related to the allegiances that we have. We are aligned to this God who wants to deliver the world from their suffering. That's what we're aligned for, and we're not joining ourselves with anything else in this world. That's how the prayers of a righteous man avails much. That's why Elijah could pray that it would rain not, and it rained not for the space of 3.5 years. The effectual, fervent prayers of a righteous man avails much because they have one allegiance. Let us have that allegiance with God. The world is depending on it. The suffering men and women of this assembly are depending on it. Our communities are depending on it. No other allegiances. It's what happens in our prayer closets will actually manifest itself in this place and in our community and in this planet. How do we become those people that are just so magnetic, so filled with the Spirit of God, that we become that natural draw to humanity when they go, my God, I'm desperate for some peace. I'm desperate for wholeness and soundness. And somehow God does that through this temple. His proximity to humanity before Christ came was the temple, was the tabernacle, right? The tabernacle and the temple was where he dwelled. Then John 1 says, the Word was made flesh and tabernacled among us, dwelt among us. And we beheld him as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And when you and I become part of the body of Jesus Christ through the Spirit, we become the tabernacle of God in this world. The way that God gets close to humanity is through you and I functioning as the temple of God in this world. We sang about him being the cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Paul finishes Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, with saying, we are all built up this spirit. We're building together, fitly joined together, a spiritual house that's being built up. Peter uses almost the exact same ideas over there in 1 Peter. Let's be that holy priesthood. Let's be that house, that tabernacle of God, so that God dwells. The only thing that this world will ever see of God outside of the natural theology is what he sees in what they see in the lives of you and I. And the reason why we could spend all day talking about the hundreds of people that did exactly what this short list that Neil mentioned last week and that Chris mentioned this week, of men and women. And what made them so powerful is they touched our lives. They touched us. This was not a remote relationship that they had with us. It wasn't social media relationships that they had with us. It was in flesh. When God wanted us to know that he understood our need, that he understood how we were tried, that he understood our suffering, he sent his son in the flesh, Emmanuel, God with us. He wants to dwell with us. Let's dwell with each other. And that is the ultimate. When we get hurt, what's our first response? when I get my feelings hurt, my first response is to back away, to protect myself, to find a safe spot. It's a natural tendency. We would be unnatural if we didn't, but we live in a different kind of kingdom, and it calls us to come together and be together and share and bear one another's burdens. So we got something to close this day out. What a beautiful day. Thank you, Chris. That was an inspired word from God. It was inspired that God would be with his people through prayers, through sacrifice. What a beautiful thing. Again, if you weren't here at the beginning of the service, we have no service on Wednesday night. If anybody does want to come here at 7:30, they can to listen to the final walkthrough of some of the music they'll be playing. And then Sunday service will be at 2 o'clock. Sunday service at 2 o'clock on next Sunday. We'll put that out on the website or on the Facebook site. Share that out for people that might not be here. Also, as soon as service is over, just to help, they're bringing in sound equipment. Let's move. I need some volunteers to help move stacked chairs and just push them to the side. They'll bring in a bunch of other equipment, and then they'll be putting the chairs back. But if you could help with that as soon as service is over.